Mr. McNamee, let me start with you, just because they asked all their questions, Mr. Clemens. I have questions for both of you. You mentioned in your earlier statement how the number of times that you injected the players has constantly risen every time you've testified somewhere. You've alleged that Mr. Clemens' steroid use to at least 5 groups of people: your lawyers, federal agents, Senator Mitchell and his staff, private investigators for Mr. Clemens, and then our staff during depositions. Why has the number continued to change if we're coming clean each time?
Thank you for the question. The beginning of the investigation with the federal government, as I didn't know what questions they were going to ask me about specific players and injections, I had no recollection of the amounts of times, because it wasn't part of my regimen where I would mark it down. It was pretty much, done by the players. They would tell me when and I would do it, but it came because I downplayed it at the beginning, where I didn't want to hurt the players, even though I told the truth about their injections and their use. And then as I lived this for the last 2 months, and then I realized, as I said in my opening statement, about the regimens. There were specific different types of regimens for testosterone, winstrol, and growth hormone, that I started to think more about it. Even though I can't be accurate, these are just ballpark numbers, or best guesstimate as far as lower end, high end, as I thought about the regimen over time.
I mean, the ballpark for Knobloch went from 7 to 9 times to 50 times.
Yes, you have to understand, every time I met, sir, with investigators, Senator Mitchell, with the congressional panel, I had more time to think about it, and the regimen for growth hormone was 4 times a week. So then I just did the math.
You didn't, okay. So you didn't keep any records or anything? This is just going back...
every time I met, each individual time, did it go up? Anything change? Everything go up? And I was specifically living this every single day, as opposed to, I didn't think about it for years.
Did you re-inform the federal government about these changes as you went forward to the federal prosecutors?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Clemens, shortly after your call, I'm going to ask some questions about the January 4th call between you and Mr. McNamee. Shortly after your call with Brian McNamee on Friday, January 4th, you sent him an email. In the email, you very clearly tell Mr. McNamee there's nothing to talk about unless he admits he is lying. Did you ever get a response to this email?
I'm sorry?
Did you ever get a response to your email to Mr. McNamee on Friday, January 4th, where you, this was after your phone call?
Congressman, after the phone call that was taped, I believe I sent an email back to him saying that unless you're going to come forward and tell the truth,
right,
we have nothing to say.
Did he ever respond?
He did not.
That's what I'm asking.
I believe it.
During the phone call, Mr. McNamee, during that call that you had with Mr. Clemens, Mr. Clemens said, "I just need you to come out and tell the truth," and you didn't respond. Why didn't you just tell Mr. Clemens during the course of that conversation, "Roger, I did tell the truth. I had to tell the truth. I'm not trying to hurt anybody." That's all you needed to say in this conversation. This was a conversation between the two of you. It seems to me this would have been a time where if this was a friend and you felt pained about having to expose him, you would have said, "Roger, I had to tell the truth." Why in that conversation didn't you say that?
Because at the state of that conversation, I realized that it was being taped, and I also didn't know if anyone else was listening. So I also was trying not to hurt him if it wasn't just him taping me. But if you listen to it and you know my jargon, I did say that. It is what it is.
How in your jargon did you say that?
I said it is what it is, meaning that I did tell the truth.
And you knew it was, for posterity and everything else, I would have thought this would have been a good opportunity for you to step forward. But you were afraid of hurting others at this point.
I was afraid of hurting Roger Clemens.
In your testimony, Mr. McNamee, in your testimony about 2001, you added an additional substance, parabola, on the list of steroids you injected into Mr. Clemens. You didn't tell Senator Mitchell about that. Is that, again, because you weren't focused on that at the time and you hadn't had time to think about it?
That's accurate, sir. It wasn't until, I don't remember actually that question being asked, if it was there any other steroids being injected by anybody else except for the congressional panel. And I thought about it, and it just, like increasing the numbers of injections, it came to me that parabolin was also another steroid used by Mr. Clemens.
You testified in your deposition that Mr. Clemens on one occasion bled through his designer pants, and a player noticed it, and that's when you bought Band-Aids. There weren't a lot of blood, there wasn't a lot of blood a lot of times, but since he was wearing his dress pants, he bled through, and Mike Stanton had noticed it and made a comment. So he always traveled now with those little Band-Aids for his butt if he bled, and that's your quote. He said something to Roger about growth hormone. I think it was Stanton started taking growth hormone, and he said something knowing that. And I walked right into Roger, just turned around to Stanton and said, "Hey man, whatever I can do to get the edge." And Stanton was asking him, thinking I told him he was taking steroids or growth hormone, etc. Do you recall any, and let me ask this, Mr. Clemens, do you recall any bleeding through your pants in 2001?
I don't.
You recall Mike Stanton ever talking to you about growth hormone?
And I don't, and I had no knowledge that Mike Stanton was using growth hormone.
Do you recall him asking you about blood on your pants?
No.
And do you recall saying anything to Mr. Stanton about getting an edge, even as a joke? Could that have occurred?
When I'm Congressman, when I'm on the mound, I want an edge. I mean, so.
Let me ask you, Mr. McNamee, could you describe that a little clearer? What happened at that point?
Involving Mr. Stanton?
Yeah, well, the incident involving him and bleeding through the pants, and how often this happened.
My best recollection was that I didn't witness Mr. Stanton witness him bleeding through his pants. It was just a comment that Mr. Clemens had told me. That's why he started buying Band-Aids, those little Band-Aids to cover up any blood that might bleed. And on a separate occasion, if not the same occasion on the plane, I had walked into Mr. Stanton talking to Roger about growth hormone, and I was upset that I believe that Mike Stanton duped Roger into thinking I had told Stanton about his growth hormone use, and Roger's response was, "I'll do anything to take an edge." And I didn't respond to it, and I was upset.
So you didn't witness any of this?
I witnessed the conversation as Roger had turned around and said, "I'll do whatever it does to get an edge," and then I figured out, because I also trained Mike Stanton on a somewhat one-on-one basis, that the conversation that he duped him into telling him because I wouldn't tell Stanton.